Nice to be with you again. I would like to welcome you to my YouTube channel Bachelor and Master English. Today we are talking about a short story by Munro Saki. The title of today's story is The Open Window. In our today's discussion, we shall be introducing this story at a glance. There will be plot summary and discussion of the text in Nepali as well. There will be critical analysis, characters, character description, character sketches, the themes will be explored and reader's opinion will be put at last. I am sure you will accompany me till the end of this video. If you are new to my channel, I request you again to subscribe my channel and watch these videos, and if you have been watching this and enjoying it, accompanying me and encouraging me, I request you, please let others be the subscriber of my YouTube channel. I am working hard and I am trying to add different dimension in the discussion of literary pieces. So, I want your encouragement and I want your accompaniment, I want your support. So, I am sure you will be with me, and here we go with the introduction. The title of the story is The Open Window. It was published in 1914 in the collection called Beast and Super Beast, a short story collection published at the dawn of World War I. The writer is Munro aka Saki. It's a short story and the sub-genre is supernatural. This is supernatural story, the story with the characters apparition, ghost, like that. And here the plot, very briefly explored. A man in need of a cure for his knobs comes to the wrong house. He is there to meet a friend of his sister. While he is waiting for her, he is accompanied by a teenage niece of a neighbor called Vera. She relates an elaborate story surrounding a window in the room that has been left open. Having heard this story, he suffers a mental breakdown and flees the house. The themes in the stories are escaping from reality, that is appearance and reality, distinction between that, empowerment, deception, sanity and insanity. And here are characters, major characters: Mr. Frampton Nuttall, Mr. and Mrs. Sapleton, Vera, Ronnie. Frampton Nuttall is the protagonist of the story. He is a young man suffering from some kind of emotional problem who has come to the country to rest. And the countryside used to be regarded as a retreat that Edwardian period. It was the time of Edward in the English literature and called Edwardian period. Vera is a seemingly polite and self-possessed girl, but underneath, mischievous teenage girl is an antagonist of the story. Her secret sadistic trick, which teenagers trick, strangers and even close relatives would not suspect. They can't believe and they would not suspect anything that this 15-year-old teenage girl like Vera would do that, but actually she possesses such character. The style of the window, this open window here, is the story of a deception perpetrated on an unsuspecting and constitutionally nervous man, Frampton Nuttall, by a young lady whose motivations for lying remain unclear. Why she is telling lies, it's not clear, but she has been telling a series of lies and her lying cannot be explored, and she is watching her face. We can't guess that she is telling lies. The structure of the story is like a meta story. Here is a story within a story. Here it's a big frame of the story here. Narrative devices in the story are symbolism, narrative hook and irony. Okay. And here we go with the plot summary. Frampton Nuttall suffers from an undisclosed nervous ailment and comes to the country in hope that its atmosphere will be conducive to a cure. that he has regarded this village atmosphere as a retreat. He is frightened by the fanciful lies of his neighbor's niece Vera. While visiting his neighbors, Vera keeps him company and tells him a story about why a window in the room has been left open. She explains that her uncle and his brothers-in-laws drowned in the moor 3 years ago on a hunting trip. Her aunt leaves the window open because she believes they will eventually return. When the hunters who actually only left that morning return, Brampton believes they are ghosts and he flees. Vera explains his departure as a result of his phobia of dogs, triggered by the appearance of the hunter's spaniel. Okay. And this is the summary of the story. Now let me discuss this story in Nepali. खुला झ्याल एचएच मुन्रो साकी को एउटा प्रसिद्ध विश्व प्रसिद्ध कथा हो भन्न फरक पर्दैन। यो कथा खुला ढोका साकीले कथेको अथवा लेखेको सर्वोत्तम कथाहरू मध्येको एउटा हो। यो कथालाई अंग्रेजी र विश्व साहित्यकै सर्वोत्तम कथाहरू मध्येको एउटा कथा मानिन्छ। यो त्यस्तो सानोतिनो लवस्तरो कथा होइन, एउटा सामान्य कथाको लागि कथा होइन, विश्व साहित्यमा एउटा चर्चाको शिखरमा रहेको एउटा लघु कथा। त्यो चाहिँ आज हामी चर्चा गरिरहेछौँ। त्यसो भएको हुनाले यो कथा जसले पनि पढेको हुनुपर्छ। यदि पढ्नु भएको छैन भने पढ्नु हुने भयो, नपढेकालाई चाहिँ यो पढ्नलाई तपाईहरुले चाहिँ रिफर गरिदिनु पर्ने भयो। यसरी बुझ्नु पर्यो। यो एचएच मुन्रो साकीको चाहिँ दि ओपन विन्डो सबैको चाहिँ दिमागमा रहनु पर्ने कथाको एउटा विषयवस्तु हो। कथानक अथवा प्लट यसको अक्टोबरको अपराह्नपछि पनि झमक्क साँझ नपरेसम्म ढोका खुला राखिन्छ भन्ने रहस्य वरिपरि घुम्छ। भेरा यहाँको चाहिँ एउटा महिला पात्र हो, यो सानो केटी, एउटा चाहिँ टिनेजर। उसको काकीको लोग्ने र दुईजना भाइहरू उसको मामाहरू र तिनीहरूको उसको काका र अनि मामाहरू चाहिँ र तिनीहरूको कुकुर समेत भासमा अथवा धापमा गाडिएका थिए। तिनीहरू त्यहाँबाट आएनन्। तिनीहरूको शरीरहरू कहिल्यै फेला पारिएन र जे भए पनि ती मृत व्यक्तिहरू ढोकाबाट छिरेर भित्र पस्नेछन् भन्ने अनौठो भाव उसको मनमा आउँथ्यो। कुनै यस्तै साँझ उनको काका र मामाहरूको मृत्यु बारेको भेराको झुटो कथा मानसिक रोगी श्रीमान नटललाई दुष्प्रभावित गर्न पर्याप्त थियो र यो कथाले नटलको धैर्यतालाई तोड्न पनि पर्याप्त थियो। जब तिनीहरू फर्कन्छन्, भेराले यति राम्ररी अभिनय गर्छन् कि उनका आँखामा डराएकी भाव प्रदर्शित गर्छन्। नटललाई उनको आँखामा डर भएको थाहा हुन्छ। अन्तमा ढोका हुँदै मूल ढोकाबाट दौडेर बाहिर जान्छ। डराउँछ, भाग्छ, साँच्चै हो कि भनेर भाग्छ। भेराको काका र मामाहरू यो देखेर अचम्म मान्छन्। ऊ कुकुर देखेर तर्सेको हुन सक्थ्यो, किनभने एकपटक उसलाई जङ्गली कुकुरहरूले लखेटेकोले रातभर एउटा चिहानमा उसले रात बिताउन परेको थियो भन्ने कथा हालेर उनीहरूको आश्चर्य भावलाई शान्त पार्छन्। उसको स्नायु प्रक्रिया, स्नायु रोग यसले तोडेको होला भन्ने पुष्टि गर्छन्। कथा छोटो छ, शीर्षकलाई यसले पुष्टि गर्छ। यसले पाठकहरूको उत्सुकतालाई अन्त्यसम्म यथावत कायम राखिराख्छ। यहाँ भेराको चरित्र उल्लेख छ एकदम। भेरा बिल्कुलै चलाक केटी हो। उसले कुरा गरिराखे पनि अर्को पात्र जुन श्रीमान नटललाई उनी तुच्छ वा उटपटाङ कुरो गरिरहेकी छ भन्ने भाव महसुस गर्ने अवसर दिन्नन्। उसले चाहिँ भनेको कथा यो एउटा तुच्छ कुरा गरेर यसलाई चाहिँ उडन्ते कथा भनेर मान्छेलाई चाहिँ त्यहाँ अल्झाउने र फिस्लिक्क पार्ने काम गरे होइन यसले। उसले यस्तो तरिकाले कथा भन्छ कि त्यहाँ चाहिँ उसले जस्तो भने एउटा चाहिँ उटपटाङ कथा भनेको भए पनि बडा चाहिँ भावुक भएर भन्दाखेरि साँच्चै हो कि भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ यहाँ नटललाई मात्र होइन हामी पाठकलाई पनि बनाइदिएछ क्या। पढ्दाखेरि त हो कि भन्दा भन्दै अनि अन्तमा आउँदाखेरि त हामी पनि यो भेराले बनाएको मूर्ख पात्रको रूपमा पढ्नु, हामी आफै मूर्ख हुन्छौँ। यस्तो हामी मूर्ख मूर्ख हुन पुगेको कुरा हामीलाई नै थाहा हुँदैन। अब बिचरा मानसिक रोगी यो नटललाई कसरी थाहा होस्? त्यो खालको चाहिँ कथा रच्न, त्यो खालको कथा रचेर तत्कालै चाहिँ कथा रचेर कथा कथेर भन्न सक्ने चाहिँ क्षमता त्यो 15 वर्षकी केटीमा जुन एउटा आएको छ, त्यस्तो खालको पात्र जुन एउटा भेरा जुन यहाँ साकीले जुन प्रयोग गरेको छ, एउटा अचम्म यो विश्व साहित्यमै एउटा उत्कृष्ट पात्रको रूपमा चाहिँ त्यो पात्रलाई लिन सकिन्छ। यस्तो खालको क्षमता भएको मान्छेहरू जुन 15 वर्षको उमेरमा ऊ चाहिँ अलि बेचैन हुन्थ्यो। उसको उमेरका महिलाहरू उसको चाहिँ केटीहरूलाई अलिकति नियन्त्रण थियो त्यो एडवर्डियन पिरियडमा। त्यसपछि त्यतिखेर महिलाहरूलाई भन्दा केटीहरूलाई बढी निगरानीमा राखिन्थ्यो। अनि उसलाई चाहिँ आफू केटी भएकोमा चाहिँ अब त्यति दिक्क लाग्थ्यो। त्यही पनि उसले चाहिँ मान्छेहरूलाई कसरी ढाँटेर कसरी चाहिँ एउटा उल्लु बनाउने भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ सिकिराखेकी थिए। हामी यो कथा पढ्न थाल्यो, हामी पनि उल्लु भएको छौँ। यो भेरा त्यस्तो पात्र हो। अनि उसले अब मान्छेहरूलाई सही तरिकाले चाहिँ यस्तो तरिकाले मनोरञ्जन दिन सक्छ। त्यो मनोरञ्जन त्यो खालको चाहिँ अभिनय गर्न पनि सिपालु छ ऊ, अनि कथा कथ्न पनि सिपालु छ। अनि त्यसपछि मान्छेहरूलाई कसलाई कसरी उल्लु बनाउने भन्ने कुरा सबै थाहा छ। अब धेरै जसो यो 13 देखि 19 वर्षका यी टिनेज गर्लका केटाकेटीहरू उमेरकाहरूले चाहिँ यस्ता उटपट्याङ कामहरू स्वाभाविक रूपमा गर्छन्। एकले अर्कालाई चाहिँ उटपट्याङ गर्ने चाहिँ अब उपहासको पात्र बनाउने धेरै काम गर्छन्। तर यी मध्ये पनि यो त्यो खालको चाहिँ पनि विशिष्ट एउटा पात्र चरित्र बोकेको पात्रको रूपमा चाहिँ एउटा साकीले उसलाई यहाँ चाहिँ प्रयोग गरे पाइन्छ। यहाँ के छ भन्दाखेरि भेरा बिल्कुलै चलाक छ। उसले कुरा गरिराखे भए पनि अर्को पात्र जुन श्रीमान नटललाई मैले होइन भनिसकेको छु, उसले तुच्छ या उटपट्याङ कुरो गरेको थाहा छैन, एउटा उसले त्यो महसुस गर्नै पाउँदैन। श्रीमान नटल स्नायुको रोगी र त्यस ठाउँमा अपरिचित व्यक्ति हो भन्ने थाहा पाउनसाथ उसले झुटो कथाहरू कथेर उल्लु बनाउन सुरु गर्छ। उसले कथाहरू यसरी कथ्छे कसैले पनि त्यो कथाहरू झुटाउनु भनेर शङ्का गर्नै सक्दैनन्। उसले स्वाभाविक रूपमा बोल्छ र अभिनय पनि गर्छ। उसले काकाको मृत्युको कथा, काकीको दुःखद विपदबारे जुन यस्तो स्वरमा भन्छ कि अनि त्यो मान्छे त्यो खालको चाहिँ कुरा अर्काले शङ्का गर्नै सक्दैन। मृत मानिसहरू फर्केर आएका छन् भने जुन भन्ने भाव श्रीमान नटललाई अभिभूत गराउनका लागि उसले आँखाहरूमा डरको भाव देखाएर बोल्छ। नटललाई कोठामा लोग्ने मानिस भएको भाव त हुन्छ, तर मृत्युबारेको कथाले उसलाई भ्रमित पार्छ। उसलाई स्नायुको रोगी हो भनी वर्णन गरिएकोमा व्यङ्ग्य त यो कथा नटलले विश्वास गर्छ। हो, यसरी यस्तो एउटा रोचक कथा लेखेर एचएच मुन्रो साकीले विश्व साहित्यलाई ठुलो योगदान गरेका छन्। यसबारेमा चर्चा बढी नेपालीमा भन्दा पनि अङ्ग्रेजीमा चर्चा म यहाँ गर्दैछु। अब यसको चाहिँ चर्चा क्रिटिकल एनालिसिस र रिडर्स रिभ्यूमा विशेष गरी यहाँ हुन्छ। ओके, हियर वी गो विथ द डिस्कसन। नाउ critical analysis. The Open Window is one of the best stories told by Saki. It is considered as one of the best stories in England and world literature as well. Saki's wit is at the height of its power in the story of a spontaneous practical joke played upon a visiting stranger. The practical joke recurs in many of Saki's stories, but it is perhaps the most successful and best known examples of the type. As we go through the story, you come to know that Frampton Nuttall, a nervous man, has come to stay in the country for his health. His sister, who thinks he should socialize while he is there, has given him letters of introduction to families in the neighborhood whom she got to know when she was staying there for a few years previously. Saki is considered a master of the story, short story, often compared with O. Henry and Dorothy Parker. His tales feature delicately drawn characters and finely judged narratives. The open window may be his most famous, with a closing line, "Romance at short notice was her specialty." That has entered the lexicon. Tall tale writer Saki dramatizes here the conflict between reality and imagination, demonstrating how difficult it can be to distinguish between them. The unfortunate Mr. Nuttall falls victim to the story joke, so does the reader. The reader is at first inclined to laugh at Nuttall for being so gullible. However, the reader too has been trapped by Saki's story and must come to the realization that sure he is also inclined to believe a well-told and interesting tale. The open window offers a great way of learning about the story in brief. It follows the life of Frampton, who moves into a new town. He wishes to cure his nerves, and his sister helps him as she lived there some time ago. She arranges a meeting with one of her acquaintances, Mrs. Stapleton. On reaching her house, he encounters her niece Vera. She points to an open window and tells him about the reason behind it. She tells Frampton that her aunt's husband and his two brothers, got killed in a tragic hunting accident. Her two maternal uncle and her uncle were killed in a tragic hunting accident. Moreover, she warns him that Mrs. Stapleton anticipates the return, so she keeps the window open. Eventually, Mrs. Stapleton comes to meet him and tells him that she is waiting for her husband. This disturbs Frampton, and he gets horrified when he sees three men approaching him in hunting gear. Thus he flees the house. As Saki remarks, the story's end, making up stories that add a bit of excitement to life, romance at short notice is Vera's specialty. The open window tells us about the ability of clever people weaving deceptive stories to be manipulative to others. Moreover, it also shows how tough it can be to determine the truth in a story. The open window is set at a country estate of a typical upper-class family of the time. Mr. Nuttall, suffering from an undisclosed nervous illness, has been encouraged to seek refuge in the country. Such a rest in the country was a typical method of treatment among the English before the rise of modern psychology. It was believed that a slower pace of life, fresh air, and quite cold cure those suffering from nervous disorders. The plot of the story moves around the mystery that the window is kept open every evening until it is quite dark. The open window narrates the story of Mr. Frampton Nuttall, who was suffering from a nerve disorder. He looks out for a cure in a countryside and goes to meet a family friend, Mrs. Stapleton. Well, he visits her. She is away, and he meets her young niece, who refers to a family mishap while focusing on the open window. Hence, the entire story is based on an open window with a mysterious backdrop. The open window is a mystery story. While explaining the mystery of the big open French window, Mrs. Stapleton's niece Vera creates an imaginative story with a mysterious backdrop. Later, when the three men with guns arrive with a dog, it makes Frampton believe as though he encountered ghosts, and he rushed out of the house wildly in fear. The open window story has a tripartite structure. The first part beginning with the conversation between Vera and Frampton, the second with the entrance of the aunt, and the third with the return of the hunting party. Saki employs flashback to divide these three parts, interrupting the present with a short story within a story, with a story within a story, talking about a story, that is meta type of narrative, frame narrative here by Vera's Imagine Past. Just as Vera tricks Frampton, so Saki tricks readers by leading them to believe that Vera is a credible storyteller. Saki's characterization of Vera also provides some clues to the careful reader about Vera's true nature. Vera is an important character in the story because she introduces childhood theme common in many of Saki's stories. The open window is the story of a deception perpetrated on an unsuspecting and constitutionally nervous man by a young lady whose motivations for lying remain unclear. The most remarkable of Saki's devices in the story is his construction of the story's narrative. The structure of the story is actually that of a story within a story that I already discussed here. The larger frame narrative is that of Mr. Nuttall's arrival at Mrs. Stapleton's house for the purpose of introducing himself to her. Within this narrative frame is the second story that told by Mrs. Stapleton's niece Vera. The most important symbol in the open window is the open window itself. The open window comes to symbolize Mrs. Stapleton's anguish and heartbreak at the loss of her husband and younger brother. The window is a representation of this desire to escape. It is a symbolic window to a different world through which Vera can travel into an alternate reality entirely of her own making. The open window is told by an omniscient third-person narrator who focuses the story on the regions of Frampton Nuttall to the tale Vera tells him. Its action is presented by a narrator who is not himself involved in the story. Saki allows the narrator to portray events from a variety of points of view, conveying what all of the characters are doing and what they are feeling or thinking. Saki's story employs the technique of frame narrative that embodies another tale within it. Added to this structure, the narrative is written as a tall tale with irony and connotation. Vera's story has nothing but a tall tale, folklores and legends that describe people of different people or events in an exaggerated manner, totally hyperbolic manner here. Vera's name misleads Frampton Nuttall because its origin in Greece in Latin may mean something different. For most of the story, until he runs from the house, the reader shares Mr. Nuttall's point of view. Like Mr. Nuttall, the reader is at the mercy of Vera's story. Vera is a girl with a knack for stories. She never has a moment of unease when it comes to talking. Characters like the niece or Vera here in this story are all the kind that stick with you, make you laugh months later. Not only now, after many months, and you realize what happened and you start laughing. Such kind of impression you have in the story. So Wicked having her little joke. It is difficult to imagine that a short story of only a couple of pages, around 1200 words, could be so shocking and surprising. Undoubtedly, the best short story I have ever read is The Open Window till the date. And the most entertaining one as well for me. The story here is very simple on surface, but there therein lies the magic. It's a classic story. If you read Moo with sharp eyes, the cleverness of Saki's use of language rams and hits you numb. It sends chills down your spine and develops eyes to see deception around you. It is very freaky, handling the matter of a three-way deception of insanity and sanity. It's so shocking and surprising. Imaginative crafting of stories by self-possessing young lady. Whole short stories built around the seemingly trivial oddity of a French window left open on an October afternoon. What is the French window? A type of door open to? In the literal sense, it's to the lawn and the snipe moor beyond, but it's also a window into troubled minds and spirits where truth and reality are open to question. Saki is suppressing his laughter here, but you are sensing it. It is not funny, not really, even though the comic elements are superbly staged in the story. Now, here we go with the character of Frampton Knottle. Mr. Frampton Knottle is a nervous man. He comes to the new country hoping that its atmosphere will be conducive to a cure of an unspecified nervous disorder. He brings a letter of introduction to Mrs. Sapleton in order to make her acquaintance for his stay in her village. While he wants for Mrs. Sapleton to appear, her niece Vera, her teenage girl of 15, keeps him company and tells him a story about why a window in the room has been left open. He believes Vera's story. The window remains open in hopes that Mrs. Sapleton's husband and brothers will one day return. She says they died long time ago. Later, when Knottle looks out the window and sees figures approaching who match the descriptions of the long dead hunters in the niece story, he suffers a mental breakdown and flees the house. In the open window, a chief character trait of Mr. Knottle is his self-absorption, which leads to his gullibility. Okay, and this is the character sketch of Frampton Knottle, and here is character sketches of Vera, Miss Vera. Vera, a 15-year-old teenage intelligent girl, is an antagonist of Saki's The Open Window. Like the girls of her age, she likes to play pranks, but she is mischievous. Her very character itself is ironic, as what she appears and she really is obviously different. Even close relatives would not suspect what she actually is and does. Like other girls of her time, she finds her life very boring at the age of 15. She must spend a great deal of time by herself and probably indulges in all sorts of fantasies. She needs to study a lot, but she is busy in such activities here. She is a shrewd judge of people. She senses immediately that the visitor, Frampton Knottle, is a bundle of nerves and a hypochondriac in manner. She foresees how he would react to a supernatural story, and he spins or fabricates one tale on the spot to watch his reaction and provide herself with some welcome amusement. And these two characters' description we have discussed so far. Now let us go with the themes of the story. Though it is a remarkably short piece of fiction, The Open Window explores a number of important themes. Themes in this story include reality versus appearance, deciphering truth, deception, and sanity and insanity. In showing us three adults unquestioningly believing the fantastic ghost and adventure stories of a teenage girl, Saki questions why we are so often quick to believe anything we are told. Other themes in this short story are the absurdity of etiquette, the open window, Saki's tale of the anxious Frampton Nottle's ill-fated encounter with the precious young storyteller Vera in the England countryside is ultimately a satire of excessive decorum, fiction and perspective, the romance of hypochondria, innocence and guile. All these are the themes in the story. Now, let's go with reader's opinion. This reader's opinion is also a part of critical analysis, but how reader perceives is a matter, and this has been separately discussed, but it's a part of critical appreciation, as I already mentioned here. The open window is a charming gem with a twist at the end from British author Saki. Pure name Hector Hughes Munro, H.H. Munro or Saki. This Saki is a pen name. We are in suffocating, stuffy Edwardian England, where a gentleman journeys to a rural town for his mental health. As the story opens, he is waiting in a parlor with a large open French window for the lady of the house. Meanwhile, the lady's 15-year-old niece Vera waits with him and tells him a story. After all, as we learn at the end, romance at certain notice was her specialty. With one reading, we can side with Vera in her role as youthful trickster, as she exposes the foolishness and pomposity of the adult world by the power of imagination and abilities as a storyteller. And through another, we can observe the negative consequences of telling lies. The mixing of these two views can lead to endless interpretations of the story. The Open Window is one of Saki's best love stories. It best exemplifies that indolent, delightfully amusing world where nothing is ever solved, nothing altered, a world in sort extremely like our own, centers around a practical joke played by 15-year-old Vera on a pompous man, Frampton Nottle, who is undergoing a nerve cure. The self-possessed girl of 15 invents a tale of the tragic disappearance of her uncle and cousins, which exactly happened 3 years ago. Her aunt awaits their return each day. The ghosts come home and Nuttall makes a headlong retreat from this haunted house. It is only after Nuttall is thus disposed of that the reader finds out that Vera fabricated the story. The personality of Nuttall, the jockey, seems clear that he is neurotic and of a self-imposed delicate psychological nature, hence his need to undergo a nerve cure. Frampton Nottle has retreated to the countryside as part of nerve cure, which I assume is an Edwardian term for some sort of mental health breakdown. To prevent him from being isolated, his sister has furnished him with letters of introduction for formal visits on a succession of total strangers. In one house, he is greeted by a very self-possessed young lady of 15. In this short story, Saki dramatizes the conflict between reality and imagination, demonstrating how difficult it can be to distinguish between them. Not only does the unfortunate Mr. Nottle fall victim to the story's joke, but the readers like us are. We are also become jokey, and we are the characters. How fooled we are! It's a really hilarious job. It's quite funny story of a young girl who has a gift of spinning stories at short notice, and of a man who falls victim to it. Had the ending been an explanation of facts to Mr. Stapleton, it would have been this poem. As it is a perfect story for an evening with a nice cup of tea. It's witty and funny, irony, satire, humor, dark humor. This story has it all. It is one of the best stories ever narrated. The balance between humor and horror is perfect. It's amazing for any reader for the first time. They are totally mesmerized with the story. We never knew being a fool by a writer could be this hilarious. The story is also creepingly prescient of Saki's own death arising from the trenches of World War I. Okay? That's all with the discussion of today's story, The Open Window by H. Munro aka Saki. I am sure you got the points with this long discussion of around 35 minutes, and you want me to continue with my job. You want me to go ahead with other discussions of different literary pieces. So, I want your accompaniment, I want your subscription, and I request you once again, please subscribe my channel and please share this video among your friends for other discussion. Thank you very much for your time and patience. We shall be back again. Have a nice time.